What's up guys, Chris here, back with the reassembly video for the Glock 19 frame. So if you follow the previous video and disassemble it completely, this is what it looks like when it's completely taken apart. So we're going to start with the most difficult part, and that is putting the hammer assembly back together. So I'm just going to move everything else out of the way for now, and I'll see you guys in a second. Okay, we're back. So you have your hammer chassis. Sorry for interrupting your video, Chris, but I actually found a much easier way to assemble this hammer housing, so I'm going to show that to you right now. Alright, so let's take a look at how to do this. So you have your empty hammer housing right here, the chassis, and we're going to take our hammer in this orientation, and we're going to fit the hammer wheel into the hammer like that. Next we're going to put in the hammer spring, and it goes in that direction. You're going to want to prepare your hammer pin, which is the one with the bigger end, and the hammer goes into the chassis like this, but the hammer spring here, this little bent part, is going to be resting on this ledge right back here. So you want to go ahead and insert the hammer, make sure the spring gets hooked back there, put some pressure on there, get your pin, drop the pin in, and you're going to have to use your finger here to kind of wiggle the hammer around to get the pin in, and there we go, it dropped straight in. So to get the valve knocker in here, which is the next step, this part right here, and it goes in that direction in the hammer chassis, we're going to want to back out the hammer pin so that we can actually install the valve knocker, and push it out so that it's still holding the hammer in place, but we've cleared up this notch. Let's see if we can get some light in there. You can see this notch right here is where the valve knocker is going to go in. So in order to get the valve knocker in, you have to pull the hammer back and insert the valve knocker. Then you can let the hammer go forward, and it's going to hold the valve knocker in place. Now, the hammer pin secures the hammer, and it goes through the bigger upper hole in the valve knocker and then comes out the other side. So to do that, you can use your finger, or in this case I'm going to use a punch. Just lift up the valve knocker and push the pin through to the other side. So now you've secured the hammer and the valve knocker in the housing. So next up, we're going to be installing the Sear and the Sear spring, and they go into the second hole from the bottom right here. And if we're looking at the hammer housing from the right hand side, the Sear goes in this way. So we're going to get our pin started in here. And by the way, this pin is unidirectional, so it doesn't have any knurlings or anything, so it goes in either way. Start by sliding it in there. Take your Sear and get that secured on the pin. Now at this point, just to keep it in place, we can swing it up, push the hammer back slightly, and the Sear is going to lock into place up there, just to make it a little bit easier. And what you need to do next is install the Sear spring. So it's going to go in with this leg to the left side and the flat leg to the right side. So the flat leg will be resting on this little ledge right here on the Sear. So let's go ahead and pop that in here. And push the pin through. So now the spring is secured in there. Now this pin doesn't have any tension on it at this point, so it has a tendency to slide out, so be careful with that. And next step, I'm just going to adjust the hammer spring arm a little bit. Doesn't really matter. The next step is that we need to hook this end of the spring into the small hole of the valve knocker. So to do that, we need to cock the hammer back, and it's going to lock onto the Sear. And now you can sort of, with your finger, push the valve knocker back just enough so that you can see the hole right here. I'm not sure if it's showing up on video, but the hole is right there. And what I like to do next is take a small pair of pliers, grab a hold of this piece of the spring, and hopefully hook it into the Sear, or I'm sorry, the valve knocker. So right now we have hammer wheel, hammer spring, we have our hammer pin, we have the Sear spring and Sear pin installed, and the valve knocker, in case I forgot that. So what you want to do next is just release the tension on the hammer, push the Sear back with a tool, a punch or whatever, and it comes out. So the last part that we have left is the valve reset knocker, and that rests in this cutout right here of the hammer assembly. So what I like to do is, now just a side note here, that this spring, the valve reset knocker spring, it has a tendency to fly off. So you probably want to wait with installing this until you're ready to put it into the actual pistol. But just for demonstration, I'm going to do it right now. So we'll drop the spring into place, kind of hold it with our finger, and the valve reset knocker goes in that direction. So we're just going to push the spring down with this little leg, and it hooks into place like so, and it should be springing up and down freely. So be careful with this. Usually when you install this in the hammer housing or in the frame, put your thumb over here just so the spring doesn't go flying. So that right there is the Glock, or TM/WE, and I guess KJW as well, hammer housing assembly the easy way. Okay, so that's it for the hammer assembly. Let's move on to the next step. We don't lose the spring. So we're going to put this to the side for now and take a look at the front inner assembly. So let's get the parts out. We can wait with the magazine catch. We'll need the hammer pin. Okay, so let's start with putting the trigger assembly back together. So the trigger arm, the trigger, and the trigger safety. So the trigger safety goes in like this. Make sure the holes line up. Grab one of your pins and slide it in with the knurled end from the right side and push it into the left. And you might have to wiggle the parts around a little bit, and there we go. The safety is in place. Take your trigger bar in this orientation, slide it into the slot in the trigger and align the holes. Take your pin and push the pin in place. And there you have it. There's the trigger assembly and trigger bar. The trigger bar spring we'll be taking a look at when we actually install this into the frame. So next up, we're going to put the slide lock lever spring back into place, and that goes in here. So we'll take the slide lock spring pin, get it started, insert the let's see, hold on, let me just show you the direction this is going. So slide lock spring is going to be sitting like this in here and then pivot this way. So get the pin in, get your slide lock spring, put it in there, push the pin through, and it's in place. So next up, we'll put the the serial number plate / safety back into the frame, and it goes over the screw post and into here, like so. And at this point, we're going to be putting in the trigger, because the trigger will not go into the frame if the inner frame is in place. So we'll go ahead and just slide the trigger in like this. Doesn't have to be exact, we'll align it later and put it in place with the pin. And now we're going to slide the inner frame assembly into the frame. So if you try to do it upright like this, the slide lock plate spring is going to come down. So you need to push that up and kind of do it sideways so the spring doesn't interfere, and it should click into place like so. At this point, what we're going to do is we're going to install the trigger bar spring onto the trigger bar, and it goes on here. Whoop. Hooks onto the arm like so, and you'll see that the loop that is going onto the inner frame assembly needs to be flush with the frame, otherwise you're going to get the spring caught in there. So to hook it into the frame assembly, we have to lift it out a little bit to expose the pin where it's going to be hooked onto, which is right there. Slip it over and push the inner frame back into place. So you should now have the spring in place there. Okay, so let's go ahead and secure this with the hammer pin, and we're just going to temporarily install it because we need to put the slide catch in here before we can completely put the pin through. So with the knurling to the right, put it in from the right side to the left. Make sure you go through the trigger hole. And at this point, what we can also do is, to keep this secure, we can install the inner frame screw just to make sure it doesn't move around too much. Right, so the inner frame screw is now in place, and in order to get the slide catch in here, we're going to back the trigger pin out to where we have a space in here. That's where the slide catch is going to go. So if you take a look, there the pin comes through too far. Back it out just to clear. Take your slide catch like this. Hook the spring to the arm here at the bottom. And the spring needs to be going on top of and around the edge of the slide catch. This is important, otherwise you're going to pinch it and it's not going to work. So now we need to put this into this little gap down here. Let's see if we can do it. Again, it's a little bit trickier trying to do it on camera. Okay, so I got it in there, and you can see here if I move it around a little bit that the slide catch is in place, and you need to align it in there. And once that's aligned, you can simply go ahead and tap the pin through. Now be careful when you do this, because if your slide catch spring is not aligned, you're going to catch the pin on the spring and completely deform it. So make sure it's completely aligned before you go ahead and do that. And we're going to finish that off. A little bit more. There we go. The trigger pin is installed. Now, if you get to look at this, these goddamn trigger pins, they're so loose. If you get to this point and you realize that you can't move the trigger around, take a look at the safety plate. It's probably because it's slid to the rear. So, next step is reinstalling the slide lock lever. And again, like I said, it's specific to a direction. So you want the slanted edge towards the front of the gun. Let's go ahead and get it started. And with your punch, push down on the slide lock spring and slide it into place. And it should lock in place like this. And then it actually has a little bit of a groove down here too. Well, actually the groove is here at the top, so it keeps centered. Now, what we have left, we need to install the magazine release button. And step number one is getting the spring back in here. And it goes in like this, so the long leg towards the left side of the frame. What I like to do is just take my pliers, see if I can get this on camera. Just get it started in there, and then get a better grip on the spring and push it down into place. And you'll see that the short arm is resting let's see, why can't I get any light on that? The short arm is resting against the frame down here, so now it's in place. So last step is putting the magazine release button in, and it has to go behind the spring, and then you're going to have to go in with your thumb again, manipulate the spring at the same time as you're pushing okay, the spring came out. So this is kind of awkward, but there we go. So you'll see that the magazine release spring is hooked into the magazine release and it's in place. Let's just double check. Seems to be working fine. And the final piece of the puzzle to get your frame back together is putting the hammer assembly in. So we're going to install this spring. Now be careful here so you don't lose it. Okay, keep your thumb on top of that, like this. Push the trigger in so the trigger bar comes out. Remember, if you can't do that, double check the safety. Now, you want to hook the hammer housing into the trigger bar, rotate it in, and simply slide it into place like this. And we're going to take our hammer assembly pin, right side to the left, push it in, use a punch to make sure it's flush. And finally, we're going to reinstall the hammer assembly screw, which goes back here. So right now what you can do is just do a functions check, cock the hammer, push down the two tabs and pull the trigger, and the hammer should be dropping like so. Grab your slide, put it back on, rack it a couple of times, fire, and it's working. So there you have it. That's your reassembled WE Glock 19. And in the next video, we're going to be taking apart the magazine and then putting it back together. So I'll see you guys in the next video.